Chapter 1.2 Pursuit. Vedrick's gasp seemed to suck the air from the room. Oliver couldn't breathe. The captain's shadowy black eyes were drilling into him and holding him in place.
"In here. They're in here,"
Vedrick roared. Oliver's legs were useless. His mind was frantically telling him to run, but nothing was happening. Vedrick lunged for the door. Mr. Wick intercepted him in midair, bringing him to the ground with a thud. Holding the captain down, he called to Oliver. "Oliver, get your sister and brothers out of here! Go!" Vedrick's face twisted with rage. With his free hand, he reached into his jacket and then jabbed a small black object into Mr. Wick's side. Oliver saw a blue spark and heard a sizzling buzz as the zappet came to life and surged energy into Elliot Wick. Oliver's dad slumped. "No!" cried Oliver. The captain shoved Mr. Wick's limp body aside. Fear swept over Mrs. Wick's face. Tears began to stream down her cheeks as she knelt next to her husband. For a split second, the world seemed out of focus, and then Oliver's adrenaline kicked in. "Dad!" shouted Oliver. Just as he reached to swing the door open and rush upon the captain, Oliver saw his dad's arm move, and then his eyes open. He was alive. Mrs. Wick looked to the door. "Run, Oliver!" Oliver's legs came to life, and he turned to escape. With a backward kick, he slammed the kitchen door shut in the face of the captain as he scrambled to his feet. He looked to the garage door, but it was no good. The shadow of a soldier was silhouetted in the window. The door handle shook violently under the intruder's grasp before the sound of his shoulder bashing into the door thundered through the garage. It wouldn't hold for long. Oliver searched the garage for another exit. A charging cable for the sky scooters dangled from the ceiling. It was his only hope. He grabbed the cable and pulled himself up into the rafters. The captain entered the garage. The charging cable still writhed in the air like a snake, and Vedrick looked up. Glaring with rage at Oliver, the captain pulled his pistol from the harness and aimed it. A small red dot appeared on Oliver's chest. It was over. He flinched as he saw the captain's finger press the trigger. Nothing happened. Vedrick clicked the trigger several more times. Oliver watched with curiosity as the captain turned the gun over in his hands. The power cell was missing.
"Blast. You won't get away, boy. Come down before you hurt yourself."
The garage door burst open, and 2 more men charged into the garage. The garage skylight was still open. Could he get to it in time? He sprang from rafter to rafter and climbed out onto the roof. Vedrick's voice echoed in the garage.
"He's on the roof. Hurry."
Glazed with dew, the domed roof was as slick as a frozen lake. Oliver fell to his back and slid down it. He dug in his heels, but there was nothing to grip. He awkwardly dropped off the roof, arms flailing, and his body crashed into the unforgiving ground. Oliver picked himself up and groaned, shaking out his limbs. Nothing felt broken. Soldiers appeared out of the darkness and surrounded him like a pack of hungry wolves. Step by step, he backed away from them. Something pricked the back of his neck. A row of thorny brambles created a wall behind him. He was trapped again. Or was he? Teeth clenched, Oliver twisted and dove into the underbrush. Thorns tore at his exposed forearms and poked through his clothes, pricking his flesh. He rolled to his feet and popped up, ready to run. An argument erupted among the soldiers.
"You go after the boy."
"I'm a pilot. Send one of you men."
Oliver heard the man grunt.
"You two, after him."
The voices faded as Oliver blazed forward. He came across a narrow path and recognized it as the twins' bike trail. Hope trickled into his heart. Oliver knew the woods well. The path wound among the dark shadows of tall pines. It would lead to the Phoenix. The night air echoed with heavy breathing. Pine needles crunched under the lumbering feet. The soldiers were nearing. Oliver looked over his shoulder, searching for his pursuers, but the thick forest shrouded them. They could be anywhere. Oliver crouched and listened. The breathing had ceased. The howl of the wind through the pines was the only sound. They were waiting for him. Crack! A branch splintered above Oliver's head. Something had pierced the wood.
Cruz, set your gun to stun. The captain wants him alive.
A green streak zipped past, lighting the underside of the trees with a mystical glow. At least they weren't trying to kill him anymore, thought Oliver, somewhat relieved. He still had to escape, however, so he got to his feet and ran. Whomp! The weapon unleashed another glowing green shot. Oliver dove and then scrambled to his feet again. Each time he heard the telltale whomp of the weapon, he dodged left or right.
Stop now and we won't hurt you,
Snarled Cruz, but then laughed.
Yeah, we'll be sure to take good care of you.
The other man jeered. Needles snagged at Oliver's short brown hair as a branch grazed the top of his head. Just a bit further, he urged himself. A fallen tree, a casualty of last year's windstorm, created a bridge across the chasm that separated Oliver from the Phoenix. This was his path to freedom. Broken branches and house-sized boulders littered the trail, but they wouldn't stop him. The obstacle course at the academy had prepared him. Oliver scrambled among the debris and found himself free of its clutches. He could hear the roar of the river coursing the depths of the chasm ahead. Almost there, he thought, and then something rustled in the bushes to his right. Wham! Oliver's torso burned as he hit the ground, gasping for breath. A moment passed before he caught his breath, and another before he realized what had knocked him off his feet. He'd been outmaneuvered. Oliver's arms were pinned to the ground by a soldier. The man stared into Oliver's face with a sinister grin. A drop of sweat fell from the man's brow and landed on Oliver's face. It trickled to his lips. Oliver shuddered at the salty taste.
I've got you now,
the soldier sneered. His hot breath smelled like sewage. I've got you now.
Hold him, Frank.
The second soldier, Cruz, was gasping for air a few yards away, bent over, hands on his knees. Self-defense lessons flashed through Oliver's mind. In an instant, he knew what to do. He thrust his knee up, catching his captor in the ribs. A roar of pain erupted from the soldier, and he rolled to his back, holding his chest, breathless. Oliver clambered to his feet, scattering dry pine needles. Cruz warily lifted his gun and shot several stuns. Whomp, whomp, whomp. Oliver jumped, rolled, and ran. With a quick look backward, he saw the heavier soldier, Cruz, pulling his comrade to his feet. The log was close now, just 70 feet, 50 feet, 30 feet, 10 feet. The log. Oliver stepped foot over foot. Adrenaline coursed through his body, heightening his senses. Through the soles of his shoes, he could feel every knob and pit in the wood beneath his feet. The log groaned underneath his weight. Would it hold? A sharp wind wrapped around Oliver's body, tugging at his clothes. Arms out straight, he caught his balance. Whomp, whomp. More stuns whizzed by him. The soldiers hesitated at the log as Oliver dismounted. Pushing on the wood, Oliver felt the soft bark crumble under his palms. He took a deep breath, and then pushed on the rotting log again. Stun shots blazed the earth, leaving black divots. Grunting loudly, Oliver gave one final push, and the end of the log swung over the side of the ravine. The dead tree teetered for a moment, and then gravity did the rest, pulling it into the dark crevasse. Echoes filled the forest as the timber rebounded off the chasm walls. A faint splash marked the bridge's arrival to the water below. Oliver smiled. The only other crossing was a mile away. Judging by Cruz's condition, it would take the two soldiers a half-hour to make the round trip to the Phoenix. Oliver recklessly charged through the pine forest as branches tore at his exposed skin. He had one mission: get to the Phoenix and escape. An ambient blue glow filtered through the branches, creating an eerie, iridescent scene. Through the gaps in the canopy, Oliver saw a bright aqua ball streaming upward. It burst, illuminating the exposed bits of the cold night sky. Flares. The soldiers were signaling their comrades. Oliver slid down a slope blanketed with brown pine needles. A branch caught him in the face, snapping his upper body backward. His left cheek pulsed with pain. Oliver slid past several more tree trunks before his aching body came to rest at the bottom of the slope. Oliver touched his cheek and felt the moistness of blood. He'd fix it later. First, he had to get to the ship. In front of him, the forest ended, opening into a large clearing. There was the ship, his escape from the villains who were stalking him as their prey. A warm breeze blew through the cloudless sky and rustled the branches of the encompassing forest. The Phoenix sat silently. Its large wings swept forward from the engines to the bridge. The ship's silver skin reflected the brilliant moonlight above, illuminating the clearing with a heavenly ambiance. The serenity of the setting didn't match the emotions raging within Oliver. In moments, soldiers would be swarming the area. To launch the Phoenix, Oliver needed time, something he had little of. Oliver winced as he saw the twins standing in the ship's small side hatch. What were they doing? "Get inside!" he shouted.
"What's with the fireworks?"
groaned Mason, the older of the twins. He brushed his sandy blonde hair from his blue eyes and yawned. "They're not fireworks!" Oliver broke into a sprint for the ship. The twins stood barefoot in their pajamas, clueless to the danger that lurked in the woods around them. The younger twin, Austin, stepped out from the hatch, his green eyes half open.
"Why are you running?"
"Get in the ship! Where's Tiffany?" Oliver demanded.
"I'm right here."
The girl's soft voice came from behind the twins.
"Why are you shouting?"
"Get in the ship!" he commanded again. It was as if his orders were falling on deaf ears. The night sky glowed blue. A flare sailed quietly upward and exploded with a loud thunderclap. A shower of blue sparks rained down. Austin stepped back, bumping into his sister. She grasped his shoulders uncertainly. Tiffany reached out her hand.
"Oliver, your cheek is bleeding."
He ignored her. He had closed the gap to the ship. Mason fell to the ground with a thud as Oliver pulled him through the hatch. Taking no time to help his younger brother up, he turned and slammed his fist against the button, closing the door. A yellow light flashed, and the airlock lowered, closing with a loud thump. With 2 clicks, it locked. "Austin, Mason, go to the bridge and strap yourselves in,"
"What's the bridge?"
asked Austin as he pulled Mason to his feet. The older twin began brushing himself off, looking very put off by Oliver's abrasive behavior.
"It's where Dad flies."
Mason started. There was no time. Oliver cut him off. "Tiffany, I need you to load up the navcom." Tiffany scowled.
"Why are we—"
Oliver didn't hear the rest of her sentence. Their silhouettes faded as he charged down the dark corridor toward the engine room. His head was pounding from being hit with the tree branch. His stomach was in knots. He'd only been at the academy for 1 year and hadn't flown anything as large as the Phoenix. But he had to show courage for his family.